working in cybersecurity in a school district is a very specific skill set and role in the kind of bad actors that you're working to keep at bay, I imagine, are unique. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I worked previously at Milpitas School District, which is more of a unified school district, meaning it's K through 12, we actually had a lot of high school students. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, it's more like an insider threat, right? And so the kids are always trying to hack into, the system and get into everything. And so it was always a battle, who can have, can you defend against the high school teenagers and so on. Fortunately, I've always been into cybersecurity as far as like always concerned about it. So from the very beginning of getting, implementing the network, because I got to actually implement a greenfield, meaning that there was nothing there before. So I was actually able to stay ahead of the students. So that was fortunate for me, for Milpitas. When I ended up going into the private sector, was a bit more interesting because, you walk into companies that do networking or cybersecurity for their business, and they have none. It's kind of crazy, that you'd think they would actually have something in place, but they actually don't. A lot of companies, even on the networking side, it's almost like what's that saying? The cobbler's kids have no shoes type thing. It's like for some reason they don't build it in themselves, and so I took a lot of experience from the school district where I actually did implement a lot of that security because we did have insider threats, we did have outsider threats, and actually implement them in the private sector. And so that was a big thing for me. So a lot of times I'd go into these companies and I'd have to remake the entire network, remake the entire security architecture, and so on. And eventually I made it back to the school districts. And again, I thought, well, maybe school districts will be a little different now. I get back there, they're a little more security conscious, but I was disappointed again. So, this last one, in the last 5 years, I've been building it back up, building up the architecture and so on. But there are real issues as far as like people actually, either trying to hack in or, just people not even understanding the basics for cybersecurity or information in general. Like, people going out and innocently putting student information on the web, but not really knowing or securing it or anything like that. And so I think from a school district perspective, that's probably the more insidious, side of things, where that information leaks out, not because someone intentionally does it, but they unintentionally do it, and you have bad actors that actually grab it later. And so
I find it absolutely fascinating that a good training ground for cybersecurity, sure, you could go the intelligence route and try to keep the Iranians or the Russians out of your system,
yeah.
or you could spend your time trying to prevent a bunch of high school teenagers from getting to the thing they absolutely want to get to.
Yes.
And that's probably pretty intense on occasion.
Yeah, no, it definitely can be. And it's funny you mentioned that because at one of the companies I worked at, I actually, targeted and found a nation state attack happening on the system, but mostly because of what I've learned from previously at the school district and how to actually look at stuff, what should be there, what shouldn't be there, and so on and so forth. So it actually served me quite well. In fact, at the time, my boss, who came from big companies like Oracle and Sun, he looked at the same thing I was looking at, and he said, "Oh no, it's fine, it's no problem." And I'm like, "No, that's not. Something's going on here." And I actually dug a little deeper, and sure enough, we suspect it was the Chinese trying to break into the company, and we were able to stop it, fortunately, right away. But it's just one of those things, you have to learn it if you want to defend against it.
I mean, look, on a day-to-day basis, I am more terrified of a 16-year-old than a Chinese spy. just in my daily life, but that's only as someone with a 14-year-old who terrifies me on the regular.
Exactly.
How has the proliferation of AI tools affected cybersecurity in kind of this school setting?
Yeah, and I think I've been trying to think about this, and I don't know if you recall. You probably recall, definitely. Donald Rumsfeld, when he did his saying, there's things we have to watch out for that we know, the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown.
And you go to war with the army you have, not necessarily the one you want.
Exactly. And I kind of try to equate that into cybersecurity. And so the known knowns are like things like viruses. You know what they are, you know what they look like, you know what they do, you know how to block it. You got the known unknowns, which are like, maybe viruses or polymorphic viruses that behave a certain way. So you don't know what they are, but you know what they do, so you know how to find them and stop them. And that could also be logging as well as seeing stuff that's going on. But what are the unknown unknowns? How do you defend against those? Those are things like 0 days that you don't even know to look out for. And that's what I kind of view AI is right now. And the only answer I have is building good security architecture, not just kind of like throwing in like an EDR solution because it blocks this stuff, but really thinking about when you build your network and your security architecture, what does this defend against? What does this defend against? Do we have enough compensating controls that if they get through this and this and this and this, that we're going to detect them before they get to the good stuff, right? And I think that's really lost on a lot of companies, a lot of organizations in general, schools, companies, what have you, is to actually look at that. And I think one of the things, at least for me, one of the hurdles I run into is trying to convince people that this isn't just me being, pessimistic or just scared in general. These are real things that protect you, and if you don't think of them and you don't think the how, why, and what it's for, then you're always going to have these little holes that pop up. And that's the only thing that I can think of that protects you from this AI cybersecurity threat, because now they can utilize 0 days, but they can do it at a programming level in a sense that, they can hit you and get through everything if you don't have that faster than you can actually even get notified that there's an issue in the first place.
You bring up a good point about pessimism specifically, and how important it actually is in threat detection and cybersecurity. Because I think there is a bias, and I've read this a number of times, against pessimism. Oh, it's the worst case scenario. We don't need it. Yes, it could go super bad, but it's not going to. Nothing ever is worst case scenario. Sometimes it is, and you don't do yourself any favors by ignoring the worst case scenario. Ultimately, for somebody who's operating cybersecurity in a school district, it must be exhausting for you, but we want you thinking about, like, what is the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
I need to be thinking about that.
Yeah, and probably the most cringeworthy line I get to hear is from people is, well, has this ever happened before? Like, that can justify why you don't do it. And the only answer I really have is, well, but that's the whole point. We don't want it to happen the first time, and that's why we put this in place. But for the longest time, I didn't really know how to answer that. Well, is this an issue? Did we ever have this before? And it's like, well, how do you answer that? Well, no, maybe we got lucky, maybe we did a good job with security, maybe not, but yeah.
The answer that I give to that is essentially, well, it wasn't a war crime the first time it was done.
Yeah.
Everything begins somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you using AI in your technology rollout, in your practices, specifically because it seems like AI is the only solution for problems that AI creates? It's the old aphorism, the only thing that can protect you from a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Yeah.
AI seems to be in the same situation.
Yeah, or fight fire with fire type thing. Yeah, so again, if we come back to this, good security architecture, it's not really using AI in that sense. Although part of that architecture is using AI, but building it in general isn't actually an AI function. It's someone actually taking a thoughtful look at the architecture in general and saying, okay, how are we going to limit this, protect that, and so on and so forth. So you have to really think of the who, why, what, why, when, type thing when you're dealing with building that architecture. Now, inside that architecture, it could be everything from static things like access control lists to more automated things like rules based off of identity and so on and so forth. But then nowadays they're also adding in a lot of AI. So like in the firewalls and the antivirus or the endpoint detection and response, the endpoint management and detection and response, those things are using a lot of AI to actually respond to direct threats coming from AI. So no matter what you're doing, it doesn't matter really what endpoint detection response, what firewall, pretty much all of them are now integrating AI into it. But I think from an overall architecture perspective, AI is not going to build you a resilient, secure architecture. You have to do that. You have to understand the company, and you have to understand cybersecurity in general to be able to do that. Maybe someday AI will get to that point, but I don't even know how you would ask AI a question if you don't know the question to ask in the first place. And that's really kind of what it comes into, comes back to is AI is as good as the question, but if you don't really know cybersecurity, you don't know information technology, you don't know technology in general, how do you know what to even ask for to help secure that? And that becomes an issue.
Well, that speaks to, I think, a unique perspective you have in this, working for a school district especially. Media literacy is a thing, but we're talking about some new things here. And cyber security literacy and AI literacy are probably going to become intrinsic parts of what we need to know.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to impart that knowledge? Are people talking about or thinking about this? How vulnerable are we?
If I were to go back 5 years and seeing the stuff I saw in the private sector, I would say we were in big trouble because people they don't fully understand the side of IT and cybersecurity. They go to a class and they teach them this is best practice. What they don't teach them is what is reality. And so best practice is to have separation of duties. Your security guys don't have access to the IT stuff, and the IT stuff doesn't necessarily have access to the security stuff. The problem is, more often than not, the reality is IT has access to everything, regardless. The cybersecurity side really has access to just their cybersecurity stuff, and they have no influence on, getting IT to do anything. And so, the separation of duties in a very structured industry, or a very structured organization, like something huge like the DoD or something like, a huge health provider, it works because they have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to put toward it. Most companies don't want to pay IT for anything, and much less cybersecurity, so they don't have that ability to build that structure. And so what you end up doing, these best practices that sound great on paper don't really hit it when it hits reality. So, what I've found is, for me, the best practice for 95%, maybe 99% of the companies out there is to train up your IT folks so they're both cybersecurity and IT folks, and then you build redundancy across that board. And that's the only way you're going to actually build that good security architecture that hits on all levels, not just on the ones that the cybersecurity folks see, or not just the ones that IT wants to enforce. IT is now an integral part of all that, and because they have access, they have the keys to the kingdom. They can actually make sure that actually happens. But unfortunately, we do have a lot of folks out there that are both in IT as well as cybersecurity, that this is, they don't want to change their job. They don't want to learn this extra stuff. They're comfortable with how they do stuff. But if you're stagnant in IT, and you're stagnant in cybersecurity, then you're falling behind. You always have to be moving forward. And that's what I try to teach everybody that works for me or I talk to. You always have to be pushing that forefront. You don't have to implement everything that a salesperson tells you, but you have to at least understand what's coming down the road and understand, is this going to be effective for us? Is it going to help us moving forward? So I think that's what's missing in a lot of companies, a lot of organizations in general. So
they're comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately,
this is not a time to be comfortable.
That's right.
So there's a proper level of paranoia and
Exactly.
anxiety that you really want in your IT professional right now.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because the way I got to this point was when I first started at a school district, I was paranoid about people breaking, and this is, mind you, like 1999, 2000. I was paranoid about someone breaking in, stealing a high schooler's personal information, and using it to get credit cards and ruin this person's credit. And they graduate from high school, and they have, they find out they have no credit. They can't even get a credit card or whatever it may be because someone stole it from the school that I was managing. And so I was always paranoid, like, how do we make this better? How do we make this better? And to be honest, I had thought at the time that I was just keeping up with industry. I'm like, we gotta keep going. We gotta keep going. That drive, stuck with me because I was at the school district for 15 years, stuck with me throughout the rest of my life. And so when I left, I was, like dumbfounded to find out that people hadn't moved in the last 15 years. I mean, they're pretty much back to where they were at the very beginning. And I'm like, when IT was really becoming a thing, like 2000, and I'm like, wow, you guys really haven't done anything. And that disturbs me. And that makes me a little more pessimistic about, where we are now. Because I'm afraid that organizations are still there, or maybe they finally got the idea that they need to start moving forward, but they still have a lot of road to catch up on to help defend against that kind of stuff.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I thank you for your paranoia and its service.